Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to part 5 of the supporter week. I'm going to kick this one off with a KV2 platoon game from Game Glitch and Company here. Now, the KV2 is always potentially a very enjoyable tank to be in, but in this case it might be a little less enjoyable than usual because they're up against some tier 8s. It's not too bad matchmaking wise though. It's not like they are the only tier 6s on their team. There are a fair few other tier 6s around. And of the tier 8s they're facing, well, 2 of the mediums are ahead of them. Game Glitch has already taken a hit from that Mutz. And the Scorpion really isn't a problem. It's just the Lerva that might be. But even this gun, you can still knock off a couple of 100 points of health from the Lerva if you happen to be aiming for, you know, not like the middle of the gun mantlet or something. So he could try his luck. There's been a few blind hits here. You can maybe afford to take 1 or 2 more hits from stuff like the Mutz or the TVP, but you don't want to trade away too much health. There's also a KV-85 back there, and oh, there's the TVP. So that's a decent hit. Obviously non-penning, but still 360 is not too bad. We can't exactly keep track of the damage numbers, by the way. This is 916 again, and that was the patch where they introduced the in-client damage markers, but they weren't working in replays. So the Mutz takes a hit from Wuna, and I think that must have tracked him because that lets him, that lets Game Glitch actually put in a hit. And then it turns out that this Mutz doesn't have a fire extinguisher. Oh dear. Well, that's a nice kill. That name, by the way, My Little Ponyta, I quite enjoyed that, but maybe a bit of a nerd. So this side looks secure. I mean, they've got the IS-3 there, and Wuna and General Howe are facing around the other side of that building. But over on the flank, yeah, that's a bunch of tier 7s that have just rushed that charioteer who had pushed up way too far. He basically put himself in a position where he couldn't withdraw, and it's a charioteer, so it doesn't have a lot of armour. So this is not good news. Game Glitch has moved to intercept to try and do something about it, and he's actually got one of his teammates coming to help out because the Panther M10 just decides to go for it. Now, if all 3 of them had decided to go for it at the same time, that would have been a bit bad. But, well, the Black Prince is just not fast enough, and the Panther clearly wasn't feeling bold enough. So it was just the Panther M10 that they had to contend with. So he's down on health now, but Wuna is still full health, so between them this ought to not be too bad. They've also got General Howe watching their backs, and in theory the IS-3 is helping as well, but their tier 8 heavies, the IS-3 and the Carnarvon, are both currently dealing with enemy team bottom tier heavies. So it would be really nice to have some help from the IS-3 at the moment, but they just don't have it. So another hit into the Black Prince, not a huge one, and oh dear, that's the TVP behind them. That's not good. I think General Howard pulled back a bit maybe to try and get an angle to help out these 2, but he's able to move up in time to hit the TVP for a big one, so he's not going to be feeling too confident. And there we go, the IS-3 actually then finishes him off. So the Panther's now dead, and that just leaves this Black Prince, but they're both on perilously low health. Wuna could potentially survive 1 more hit. So if he gets the chance to put another one in, there we go. Like, this is another maybe 2 hits to kill this Black Prince. I think it's going to be a bit tricky. The Black Prince, by the way, I'm not entirely sure what he was... like a high rate of fire machine like that, and granted it was versus a pair of KV2s, but I don't know, between the Panther and the Panther M10 and the Black Prince, if they'd pushed together, they could have probably easily out DPM'd a pair of KV2s, and they would have taken some hits in the process, but I suspect they could have done it. As it is, they're both very low health. General Howe is the only one that's only got got any kind of amount of hit points left, but the 2 that were actually on that corner, yeah, they're not doing so well. However, it doesn't really matter that much because most of the enemy team is now dead. With that Hellcat going down, it just leaves the artillery, who's been spotted, and the Lerva. Now the Lerva can't be AFK because they've driven past the cap. Although having said that, you know, he can't have been AFK from the start of the game. He must have gone somewhere and been AFK, and that's exactly what looks like it has happened. He's kind of in that alleyway between the two buildings, and wait, no, what? Oh, and then all becomes clear. Yes, I initially couldn't quite see the position that lurver was in. I just saw that the lurver marker's there, and he's not moving. He must be AFK. He must have had to leave the battle, but no, he'd managed to flip his tank, and I don't quite know how. I can only guess that he tried to turn in the confines of that alley whilst far too close to a building, and the physics then came into play and he just flipped himself. So he's still there. He's been there the entire game, basically helpless and on his side, and now he's got KV2s all around him. So Wuna there, getting a hit from behind. Game Glitch obviously unwilling to give him a chance to shoot his tank, but it's quite easy to get a hit, to take shots while not really exposing himself. So there we go. They basically, all three of them get shots, and then the KV3, IS3 finishes him off. So yeah, it was a bit of an unexpected end to that one, and it had to be frustrating for that poor lurver driver, but hopefully he'll learn to be a bit more careful next time, because he could potentially have made a difference, but instead he was stuck there for, oh well, it must have been most of the game, because the one damaging hit he did was against it must have been General Howe. Yeah, it must have been General Howe that took the hit. And yeah, otherwise he did nothing. Now, they were a 1-2-3 on that team list. They had, what, like 9,000 damage between them? 8,000-ish? I don't know. I haven't added it up exactly. But either way, yeah, that was a pretty entertaining end to that game. Not maybe entertaining in the way you would think a KV2 game would necessarily be with that gun, but fairly entertaining nonetheless. Next up we have King Trigon in the 215B, the British Tier 10 heavy tank, and we're going to put our serious pants on for this one. That first one was more about the entertainment value of the KV2 and finding that lurver stuck on his side like a stranded turtle. But no, this one's going to be much more about what the 215B can do. It's a lovely, lovely gun, but also the awkwardness that can come from having that rear turret. Now, there was actually a comment on the channel the other day, and it was on an older video, like a year and a half old, something like that. And this was back when there was still speculation about the potential replacement for this, because initially they were talking about there being the Chieftain. And then there was talk of a super conqueror, basically an up-armoured conqueror at tier 10. And basically neither of those things has happened. Well, that's not strictly true. Console has the Chieftain, but it doesn't have the Chieftain as a replacement for the 215B. It has it in addition to the 215B. And we still don't know what this means for the PC version. Will we get it like that as well, as an additional tier 10 British heavy, or will it be an actual replacement? Will we someday see the Super Conqueror, which was initially mooted as a possible replacement for the Chieftain, and then of course the Chieftain came along on the console anyway, so who knows? Maybe nothing will happen at all, and we'll only ever have the 215B, and it'll just be the lucky console plebs that get the Chieftain to play with, which by all accounts is quite a nice tank. Very high DPM and a very bouncy front plate. And of course it doesn't have that awkward rear turret, and a lot of people really don't like that about this tank. And it's not like the VKB where you've got super strong front armour. The upper front plate's pretty good, but the lower front plate not so much, and you've also got the turret ring mounting basically, which means you can't really side scrape as you can in the 215B. This is the 215B. In the VKB, the other B that has a rear mounted turret. But for all that awkwardness, like I said, yes, it's got a really lovely gun. It's got that British 120mm with fantastic handling, a very good rate of fire, and just the ability to pull off all kinds of snapshots that wouldn't really be possible in a lot of other heavy tanks, or at least not as reliably. Now he's struggling a bit to get an angle here because of this awkward turret arrangement, and because he's fighting on this terrain. There was enemy artillery that has actually been taken out, so that's fine. That actually gives him a bit more scope to work with. But as this is an encounter game, I mean, this is some pretty heavy engagement that's going on up at this northwest corner, which is, you know, generally the case. But this is most of both teams that are here, so it's maybe a bit more fraught than usual. And they've taken out some important tanks already. The 50B in particular, and the RT and the Leo 1, they're all nice things to knock out, but they've still got an IS-7, an E100, there's a 30B, there's a Batchat. I've just noticed their TVP has a -1, I didn't even notice what that was. And there is a Jaegeru as well, but we know he is down still quite near their spawn. They actually took out the Centurion Action X, or the Action 10 rather, that had, I think, taken out the enemy team's artillery. So he's not there for, he's not here for now, but potentially he could drive up here, and that might be an issue later on. So we're up to, what is it, almost 5,000 damage done, 1,300 blocked, mostly from the turret, I think, and he's also eaten some shells in his tracks. Not a lot of spotting, but this is all very close quarters. The enemy team does seem to sort of have the upper hand in numbers of tanks, but they still have their own artillery left alive. And if Trigon, I mean, if they try to push on Trigon here, if it looks like he's in trouble, the Stridswagen 103 will be able to get some shots back to this position from where he is at the moment. So overrunning Trigon is going to be difficult. And it really is just a war of attrition at the moment. It's trying to get those shots without exposing yourself too much and taking too many hits yourself in the process. And it might just come down to which team gets bored first, or which team decides to expose themselves too much and take too many hits and lose too many tanks. So I've sped this up because there's about 2 minutes where it's just this. And he takes, I think, 1 shot in that entire time. They've actually lost the T-54E1, but the enemy team is still not, like, they're not pushing aggressively. It's still this just exchange of fire. And I think that's the point where the artillery takes out the IS-7, even though they've lost their own IS-7. Things are starting to turn around a bit, because that's 30B. If you can make this shot, that'll be a nice gun to take out of action. There we go. And without the enemy artillery to worry about, they can now move forwards a bit. Now Trigon himself is maybe a bit hesitant to do so, but the Stridswagens come along here, and the SD-1 is pushing a little bit as well, or he's peeking out at least to see if he can maybe get round there, but I think he then decides to stick around on that corner. So there's the TVP. This is a little awkward. I mean, the Stridswagen tries for a shot. I'm not actually sure if he gets it, but he does take a hit in return. And he could, Trigon could try and push this TVP, but then he'd risk taking hits from the E75 and the E100. So he can't immediately be aggressive here. To add a complication to things, the Jaegeru has turned up, and bam! Yeah, that hurt. That really, really hurt. Now, that actually set him on fire as well, but it was never going to be enough to kill him, I don't think. And that was actually, despite it being a really big hit for Trigon to take, that was a miscalculation, because the Jaegeru had pushed forward enough to take that shot that he was then extremely vulnerable while he was reloading. And so, between that low health Leo, Stridswagen and Trigon himself, they were able to just go whap, whap, whap and take him out. The TVPs also died in this time, and that just leaves the E100 and the E75, who are now surrounded. The E100, he had a bit of health, but not so much now. So he's basically still looking at the ST1, the 100, the E75 rather, tried to take a shot at Trigon, but once again his track saved him, and with that final shot taking out the E100, they've won. So that was a really bruising encounter, and it could potentially have gone the other way, but they just held on between them, and Trigon in particular with his 6.6k damage. That was by far and away the most of anybody that was in that position. But I mean, the rest of his team were doing all right as well. There's quite a few people there with kind of like 2.5k, 3k damage. So the top half of the team, there's actually a really good damage spread, which makes up for the fact that there's a bunch of tanks at the bottom with 0, which is not so good. But it was definitely Trigon that stood out there. And as you can see, 23 shots hit out of 25 fired and 18 pens. That's a pretty good proportion. But he was well into his APCR by the end of that, because the rate of fire is just so good, you can absolutely get through all your ammo. Lastly, we have this T44-100 game from Menthel. I don't have this tank myself, but Snooze likes to call it the hover tank. And there's a good reason for that. It has very, very good terrain resistance values. So although on the face of it the mobility stats aren't that special, when you add the hidden, or the normally hidden, terrain resistance values into the mix, it actually becomes a pretty mobile machine. So Menthel here is in a top tier game. It's the Redshire standard match, and it looks relatively even. You know, there's a decent mix of heavies on each side. The enemy team's got one more, and they've also got 2 top tier auto loading heavies, but that maybe means their team has the armor advantage with the IS-6 and the 252. The deployment's a bit unusual though. It's very heavy on this side of the map. Normally you might get at least a couple of tanks going over to the 9-0 line, but in this case no, they've basically all committed to this side. The IS-6 in particular is in a very peculiar position. It's not really a good spot to be, and because he's all the way over there, I mean, he's kind of put himself out of the action. He's essentially pinned down, and also it means he can't help out over on this flank, because it looks like the enemy team has gone heavily on this flank as well. So he starts off with some shots at this Oni, and unsurprisingly, he switches to the APCR because it's an Oni, and he's going to struggle to really get a decent amount of damage out of him otherwise. So he's lost a chunk of health to the Scorpion, actually. That's not too bad though, but it's not nice to lose, what was that, 400 odd, 470 this early. So he's got to be a bit careful here. So the Oni dies. We know the Scorpion's still back there, but of more pressing concern is the fact that his allies that went into the ruined castle area have died. So there's a T69 and an SP1C coming rapidly up behind him, and then immediately to his front there's a T32 and the VK, and this is not good. This is very not good. Now the T69 could clip him, so although he knows he's going to take damage, he has a better chance of surviving if he does this and actually goes forwards and tries to take out the VK and the T32. But the SP1C just goes for it anyway, so he's going to take another hit here. His allies are, however, proving useful. They're all lower tiers, but there's just such a hail of fire that they take out. I mean, they did some damage to the T32, they've taken out the T69, so the immediate threat is gone. But the 252 is meanwhile getting swarmed, and the IS-6 has pushed up, but he's now not really in a position to do that much. And it's at this point that the enemy Stuart Emile uncloaks himself all the way back in A3. So the IS-6, I think, must have taken a hit from him in the process as well of going over that hill. So the 252 is down, the IS-6 is now being mobbed, and it's not looking that good, because there aren't any other tier 8s left. In fact, aside from Menthel, the only other high tier tank that's left is a KV3, who is now pushing around on the east flank at this stage. I'm not sure why. So a sneaky hit into the Emile 1. He's been firing APCR the entire time. Now, switching to APCR to hit the Oni, I can understand, but I think at this stage he just didn't realise he was still firing the APCR because so much started happening at once. And that can happen. Your attention can be taken away from things like that because a lot of other rather important bits of information start flying to the forefront of your brain, such as, oh my word, that's a lot of enemy tanks coming towards me. So ordinarily it might be possible to criticise someone for, oh, they're just spamming APCR, but I don't think it was intentional, because the Emil 1 and the T28 prop in particular, he might well wish that he still had some. I think preserving some rounds would have been a good idea. So that was all a bit frenetic. They have hung on more or less, but they're not in a great state. The KV-3 is pushing into hidden tank destroyers. KV-85 just got taken out by that prop. There's still the Emil 1, who is low health, but, you know, still an autoloader, and it's not like Menthal's got a lot of hit points either. Otherwise, there's just artillery and an IKV-90B, who has taken up position quite a long way from, well, anything. I mean, he'd initially placed himself on the K line, possibly expecting an enemy push around the east flank, but when it became clear that that wasn't happening, instead of moving over to the west to help out, which would have been the smarter thing to do, he's then taken up a position on that hill and now can't help anybody do anything. So Menthal is essentially now alone, with the KV-3 having died to the Stuart Emil. But not quite. They still have artillery, and I mean, initially that tracking shot looked like a duff shot, but no, he actually pinned the T28 to take a big hit from artillery, and artillery's now finished him. So Menthal takes a peek, but that proves to be a really bad idea, because it almost gets him killed. And of course, I think he was still spotted from the T28 prot. I don't think he'd left enough time. So we've cut out about 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, something like that, because he basically repositions all the way around to the other flank. And the 90B, I mean, I'll give him credit where it's due. He at least moves up eventually, because Menthal couldn't do this on his own. But he's still going to prove to be not the best player. But he has at least found his W key. And between him and Menthal and the artillery, maybe they can do something here. Now the Emil, the Stuart Emil rather, he's still going to be full health. He hasn't moved from A3. He basically drove there at the start of the game, which was not maybe a terrible idea to start with, because there was a lot of enemy tanks coming over on this side, but it's not like he will have been able to really do a lot from back there to start with. And it was only when his own allies were trying to push that he was able to come into his own. So I'm not going to rate him very highly from a tactical point of view either. So the 90B's found the Emil 1, and he takes the hit, and initially it looks very bad because, you know, the Emil could easily clip a 90B, but artillery takes the shot, takes out that Emil 1, and so that's fine. And Menthal actually takes the time to ping out a suggested course, because the 90B is a fast machine. He could reposition himself and do so without being spotted by the Stuart Emil, because as you can see, yeah, Menthal's just peeking every so often. He's getting spotted, and that guy's still there. He hasn't moved. He's got binoculars. Instead of doing this, however, instead of taking the sensible course of action, the 90B instead charges out into the open. He's not even using the high ground, he's literally just driving out onto the open field. Predictably, he dies, so much for the 90B. At least he found his W key when it mattered, but then he found his W key at a very wrong moment as well, and basically had absolutely no tactical sense there whatsoever. So Menthal tries a little reposition. I mean, he does a lot of this spotting, trying to spot for his arty basically, and that Stuart Emil, like, there isn't time for him to reposition himself. We're really running down on it, and so he spends a good amount of time just trying to spot for artillery. Now, this enemy Stuart Emil, despite the fact he's got 3 kills, he's not playing to win. He's playing to try and stop the enemy team winning, but he's chosen such a passive, campy playstyle. I can only imagine what's going on in the enemy chat right now that there's basically no way that the enemy team can win this. The best they can do is play for a draw. And I think their artillery, the AMX-13, clearly got fed up, was probably pinging the minimap and angrily trying to get him to go forwards, and he does at least get the Emil to go forwards far enough to the house in the cap, but he will go no further. They could, between them, easily push and kill Menthel with his 7 hit points, and instead, nope. He just wants to sit as far away from the action as he can, so the artillery eventually takes out the AMX-13F, and that just leaves this Stuart Emil. And now we're down to the last minute. So this is either going to be a draw or Menthel can try and make it a win, but it's risky. He doesn't want to just throw his tank away for nothing, but worst case scenario, this is a draw. There's no way this Emil could have won this for his team. He was just not playing well enough. So there's a bit of a snapshot with HE, and the HE is a risk, but it pays off. It pays off, and he gets the kill. Now, I think AP would have been sensible there, especially when he was on 200 health at the end. Even a low roll, I think, would have killed him. But the reason the HE is such a big risk with the Emil, I mean, it paid off, but it's a huge risk because the HE average pen is 50mm, and the Emil superstructure, which he did carefully aim for with that second shot after the Emil donked his, shot into the ground, it's also 50mm, so you need RNGs to be on your side to actually get a penetrating HE hit. So that was actually a little bit of a miscalculation. That was throwing a dice when no dice needed to be thrown. He should have gone for the AP, and it would have been a much more guaranteed thing. But as it was, he got lucky. The HE did roll high enough to penetrate, and he got that final kill with 2 seconds to go. So that was rather an interesting match, and the mobility of the T-44-100 certainly helped there. Yeah, thanks to camping and not particularly well played tank destroyers on both sides, it very nearly ended up being a win for, well, nobody at all, really. And it was Menthel just taking that risk at the end that paid off and just narrowly, so narrowly, swung it in their favour. So this is going to be the last tanks video for the supporter week. I will do a last overall video which will be warships. It'll be a pair of warships replaced, so it'll maybe be a bit easier to get done than the previous one where it was 3 warships replays. And then we will next week be back to normal in terms of the video schedule, because it's been a little bit hard work doing this. I'm not going to lie. Caption Guy's had a nice week's holiday, though. He's not had to do anything at all this week, the lazy bugger. So he's had a nice week off. It's just I've been doing all this stuff instead. So that's it for this video. You can hit the like button if you've enjoyed these replays. You can leave any comments below. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, stay tuned for more.